Thank you, Dr. Yaku and panelists, for such a thorough consideration of the question at the top of everyone's list: when will CAR T reach solid tumors? In that panel, and really throughout the day, we've discussed manufacturing and the many ways it touches on the evolution and the deployment of gene and cell therapy technology. The next panel is focused on just that set of questions, and really think it's wonderfully well assembled in terms of the different perspectives on manufacturing that the various panelists will bring. And we're really pleased to have Mike Paglia, the Chief Operating Officer of Elevate Bio, as the moderator. We have a special relationship with Elevate. We're investors and collaborators, and Mike is one of the guys who's bringing so much success to the company. So Mike will be moderating the panel. Mike Paglia.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. As you can see from the agenda topics, within the CAR T space, there are diverging trends of autologous and allogeneic therapies, and the demands on the manufacturing infrastructure are very different. So for our first topic, I'll turn to Thomas Page, who's the Vice President, Engineering and Asset Development of Fujifilm Diosynth. So Thomas, can you help us understand the different manufacturing challenges for the viral vectors that are used in gene and ex vivo cell therapies? Some of the trade-offs among batch size in terms of production cost, and balancing the need for material for clinical trials, release and stability testing, really versus the cost of an investigator to get to that proof of concept study that they need to so quickly. Thomas?
Yeah, Michael, thanks for the question. As you mentioned, I'm with Fuji Diosynth Biotechnology. We really focus in particular on our Texas site around viral vectors, gene therapy products. So we're doing what some folks would consider reagent virus all the way to, drug product. And, some of our cousin companies like Fuji Cellular Dynamics is working more directly into the, cell therapy piece. So in particular, our part, it is enormously challenging. I think, you've kind of, framed it well. So, the challenge in this space is that there are so many different platforms, different approaches that come in from, companies. We have some of our own platform things that we do. There's pretty typical attention that's involved with this, where folks are saying, okay, I want to get in and get that proof of concept, thing as fast as possible. And oftentimes that is not really compliant with the manufacturing platform that's going to be necessary, longer term. And so depending on how fast people are going, it can become an interesting conversation. So one of the approaches that we've really taken is on the facility and the manufacturing side of this is really to set ourselves up kind of agnostically. Let's say with BSL-2+ level of controls, we make extensive use of mobile clean room technology. You can kind of think of them as sort of isolators that you walk in. And then further inside of that, we focus a lot on process closure, isolator use, and so on, so that we can get the most efficient footprint closed off and be compatible with multi-product operation. Because as you know, with the CDMO, your cost inputs is, what's the labor, what's the setup, what's the tech transfer, time in plant, then what is the changeover, cost and timing to return the state back to, return the rooms back to a demonstrable neutral state. So to kind of create those efficiencies, we're sort of set up, let's say all the way from maybe just a few hyperstacks up to, many 2K scale, because the scaling factors, are really critical to each client's particular needs, and then their particular roadmap and their particular sense of how they're going to develop their product. So rather than sort of trying to push people through the eye of the needle, we're sort of saying, okay, here's the collaboration. This is a broad set of capabilities. So how can we roadmap, together with you to kind of meet your individual, programmatic needs or your business drivers or your, your equity financing position and all of that, because, most of us came, from that world as well. So we understand the pressures about having to get where you need to go. So I guess the point is to try to offer a very diverse set of capabilities and then detail them to line up with the business drivers. But then on the backside, to just absolutely ensure, since folks that are making these products for you, it's going to be multi-product, manufacturing. Obviously not in the same room and not within the control envelope, but within the facilities. And so to get you into that economical footprint, those are some difficult conversations, but we really try to have them as early as possible. So I know it's, it'd be great to just say, well, here's the path and it's all figured out. And this is the ironclad platform and everybody has to jump in the pool. But that's not really the way that it works at this stage of maturity for where this industry is. It's kind of like MABs were like 30 years ago. So you have to come at it from a completely different perspective to optimize what that looks like. And it's really, far different whether you're talking about a reagent virus or a final drug product for folks, but you got to be able to supply all of that matrix.
Great, thanks, Thomas. So in summary, flexibility is key as much as you
Absolutely,
can,
right?
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. So we'll stay on track, and maybe if we have some extra time, we'll ask some additional questions. But I'd like to move on to the second question, which is, and the second topic, I should say. And we're going to pull in now Rahul Singhvi on this. And hello, Rahul, how are you?
Hi, Mike, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. So Rahul, for cell and gene therapy, what's the cost of quality assurance and quality control versus production from your perspective? And really, how do you think about how these trends will evolve or change over time, appreciating some of the things that we're seeing in the cell and gene therapy industry and the learning curves for some of these processes and these systems? Just like to get your perspective on that, especially since quality is always key to all of these elements of what we do.
Sure. So, Mike, before I answer the question, let me just give a little bit of a background on Resilience, because Resilience, the company that I represent, is a new company, and many of your audience may not know about the company. So just a couple of words on that. So first of all, my name is Rahul Singhvi. I'm the CEO of National Resilience. This is a company that was formed just about 10 months ago with the singular focus of really investing in the innovation related to manufacturing science, particularly for the new modalities. And as the previous speaker was talking about how long it took for the industry to become good at making antibodies, we don't want to take 30 years to get good at making cell therapies and gene therapies. So I think the purpose of a company like Resilience is to really accelerate that by putting heavy R&D investment in really coming up with platforms that can help biology companies, companies that are prosecuting biology to create new drugs, so that they don't have to worry about the situation that they're in right now, where they have to sort of go very fast and do a patchwork of rather immature processes, and then just to get proof of concept, and then try to figure it out later, and then end up with a bad outcome. As we've all seen over the last several years. So our job is to front invest and create platforms that then we can horizontally scale and give to biology companies, so they don't have to worry about manufacturing after that. And even at the discovery stage, they're working on a very solid ground. So this is something that we think about a lot, and the kind of questions that you're asking regarding the cost of QA and QC in cell therapies as compared to production cost. I mean, these are fundamental questions, and I think it's indicative of the fact that these therapies are so rudimentary in terms of their maturity of production, that at the moment, if you ask me, for autologous cell therapy, the cost of quality assurance and quality control is almost as much as the cost of production. And frankly, it's almost 33%, a third of production cost, a third in quality, and a third in reagents or raw materials. And the raw material cost largely coming from, like, if you're using vectors, for example, they're very expensive. So that's very unusual, right? I mean, if you're making antibodies, your cost of quality is not that much as a percentage to the cost of production. But this is indicative of the fact that, if you're dealing with something like autologous cell therapy, there is very little economy of scale. So cost of production is high because, again, you're doing personalized medicine. You have significant time in the clean room because of the vein-to-vein time. But you can try to get around that, and a lot of people are trying to get better in reducing vein-to-vein time or automation and stuff like that. But you still have to deal with the quality control. And the issue with quality control is not only it is personalized, so you have to do it on every patient's batch, but you also have very little understanding of the critical quality attributes. I think most people don't really know what to test for, so they test for everything. And when you test for everything, it takes a long time and it's very expensive. So unfortunately, that's the kind of situation that we are in right now, and our job is to get better in terms of really understanding what the critical quality attributes are, really spending the time, spending the money to really understand that. And once we do understand that, we can change that ratio, that equation. But for the time being, if you ask me what it is today, it's almost as much as the production cost, at least for autologous. For allogeneic, I mean, of course, you have some economy of scale, or at least a possibility of economy of scale if you understand how to make these type of products, which is still in a very rudimentary stage, by the way. But you do have the fundamentals of reducing the production cost through economy of scale. And then you're back in the situation of the quality control tests. You have to define them very carefully. And you will get the benefit of economy of scale there, because you can have a large number of doses coming out of each batch, and the cost of quality is spread across all of those doses. So you will get much lower quality control costs in an allogeneic situation if you're able to scale up.
Great. Thank you, Rahul. And I know there are other topics at this conference about the regulatory implications of understanding and defining those CQAs as well. So it's a very excellent position on that. Thank you very much. So the next topic I'd like to bring in Rupa Pike. Rupa is the Director of Enterprise Science and Innovation Partnerships at Thermo Fisher Scientific. Rupa, I know you know this topic well, but the question we always ask is, will point of care production become reality? How will that really change product development strategy for the pharma industry, as well as the investors that are investing in these companies and maybe even these technologies? So what would be the regulatory implications as well for some of these products if it goes to more of a centralized or decentralized model in your opinion? Rupa?
Thank you, Michael. The short answer is yes, because I am always optimistic, but I'm going to give you reasons why. So point of care or decentralized manufacturing is not a new concept, as many medical centers and hospitals have successfully manufactured CAR T cells for their clinical trials before the 4 commercial products came on the market, right? So for example, UPenn, everybody knows UPenn CHOP, what they've done with Novartis, NCI, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Fred Hutch, Baylor. These are examples where they were manufacturing CAR T very successfully prior to commercialization. So it can be done. A decentralized model enables faster manufacturing and delivery, as it eliminates all the challenges related to cold chain logistics, supply chain logistics from a centralized facility. And we all know that there are patients at the other end who don't have the luxury to wait for a long time. So there are cost reduction benefits if these are manufactured in a decentralized manner in a hospital. But it is important to remember that hospitals will need to make arrangements both logistically and space-wise to store the extra doses, to store the stability samples. or they could use a company like Thermo or a third party for long-term offsite storage, and that's an option too. Manufacturing cost can also be reduced. There was an excellent case study out of Switzerland in a paper that showed that there was a significant cost reduction in manufacturing in a decentralized model. So how will that change product development strategy for pharma or venture investors? I honestly think that these developmental strategies will depend on the regulatory landscape. So I'm going to try to address both of those together, Michael. We know that the issue of decentralized or point of care manufacturing has been on FDA's mind for quite some time. I'm sure many of you heard Dr. Mark Peters speak this morning, and he addressed that issue. Also, Dr. Peters and Dr. Scott Gottlieb from the FDA have published in 2018 in New England Journal of Medicine, and they've outlined two scenarios. One is a decentralized model with a centralized control. And in this case, a pharma company or a venture investor-backed startup can be a sponsor, but the product is manufactured at multiple sites under the supervision and regulatory control of the sponsor based on their CMC. The second one is the manufacturing can be carried out by a consortium of academic organizations using a very well-defined critical quality attribute panel. One of our panelists mentioned that, and release criteria for the final product. And they can then conduct their respective clinical trials in their centers, pool all the data, and then seek FDA approval to manufacture in-house using a site-specific license. So these two models have been put forth. What role can biopharma CDMOs play if this model shifts to a decentralized? I think they can help facility design. They can help hospitals with QA, QC, regulatory data management functions. Thermo has done this very well for a lot of our partners. Developing closed and automated, semi-automated manufacturing platforms, helping with GMP grade raw materials. And most importantly, I feel this topic keeps coming up, is building a GMP compliant training force. You know, hospitals have very good nursing staff, very good bone marrow transplant people, but it doesn't necessarily translate into GMP manufacturing. And I think here's where biopharma, biotechs, such as ourselves and other small companies can have a stake and help these centers of excellence or these academic organizations with site-specific license follow the same path as the 4 commercial products have followed. This model will only work if safety and efficacy is not compromised. So we have to remember that. And lastly, I've heard a provocative question thrown around, and I'm just going to add fire to that. And will cell therapies achieve a 361 status and become standard of care, similar to bone marrow transplants? We don't know the answer to that, but I think we need to keep asking that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupa. Just curious, maybe a follow-up there, since we have some time. Where do you feel the standards and controls play in that? I think we are all challenged with thinking about how the industry is testing these products as well, and the need for maybe more harmonization across centralized or a decentralized model. I wonder if you had any comments there.
So they are two different entities, right? I think for a centralized model, because it is done by biopharmas, typically, at least, you know, the Novartises and the Juno and the Kite Gilead of the world, they have been in biologics for a long time, so they understand the standards. I think it will be important if we move to a decentralized or point of care. I do believe that, you know, FACT standards or IAABB or organizations such as those who have helped get standardization in the bone marrow transplant industry can also help in the decentralized area to get these standards. And they will need to be because if these are site-specific license, they need to have similar things. And the decentralized model with a centralized control will need to have absolute harmony, right? Because it's one sponsor, one CMC, and everyone has to follow it. And I think that's where QA, oversight, training, those things would become very important.
Yes, the training is very important and key. Great. Thank you, Rupa. Appreciate that. So last, I'd like to introduce Tom Venkat, who is the Chief Technology and Strategy Officer at Catalent Cell and Gene Therapy. Tom, I was wondering, and we're all asking the questions about autologous and allogeneic. It's come up a few times now, even on our panel, but how close are allogeneic CAR T cell therapies from whether it's mainstream or even approvals? And if successful, what are the market implications of allo CAR T? What are the cost implications and rewards for developing allogeneic cell therapy treatments? And, again, more broadly versus one or two programs. And we see certainly the industry is moving towards that, whether it's through gene editing technologies or other things. So just wanted to get your input there based on your expertise.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate the question. Appreciate being here. The allogeneic field, very, very exciting field today, right? I mean, a lot of work being done, a lot of brilliant, bright people in the field. So it's really exciting, really, part of Catalent where we do have a cell therapy CDMO where we're working with autologous and allogeneic. And it's just, every day is an exciting day. So, but if you take a look at the pipeline today, so, still the majority of pipeline in biotech, biopharma is still autologous. Probably, maybe 2/3 autologous, maybe 1/3 allogeneic. But, if you kind of look at that distinction, you're seeing a little bit faster growth in the allogeneic pipeline. So, that's exciting. And why? Well, we're starting to see some promising successes in early stage clinical trials. So some promising data that's coming out. And of course, that creates excitement. And that creates more investment, and that brings more people in, and there's more innovation and more work on pipeline. So it is a very kind of exciting time right now. But having said that, I think we all know there still are some challenges. And one, as we talked about at the beginning, is in manufacturing. I mean, it's scaling up these allogeneic cell therapies, in particular, if we're talking about CAR T, for example. When we're going to allogeneic, we're talking about high doses, we're talking about larger patient populations, and you do the calculations, and you want to be scaling these up to on the order of 1,000 liters, and that's not being done today. And to be able to scale up these T cells while retaining critical quality attributes, while retaining the phenotype and the functionality of the cells is still a challenge today. So that's something that, as Rahul referred to, that's something that requires more innovation, more investment in platforms and working through this. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of advantages, and we've touched on some of them with allogeneic versus autologous. I mean, like we said, the scale, the timing, being able to get these treatments to the patients. And certainly you're overcoming a lot of logistical hurdles. I mean, I think Rupa actually brought up some really interesting ways to think about kind of a decentralized, centralized autologous platform. I think it's really, really nice thought. But there still are going to be some logistical hurdles. And the other thing with the allogeneic, you're starting with healthy donor cells, and you're going to have a higher level of functionality of the T cells. They're probably going to proliferate better and more efficiently, so it'll be easier to expand these. So there are a lot of advantages in allogeneic, but there also are disadvantages. I mean, we still need to continue to improve and optimize our gene editing. We need to be able to make sure we are reproducibly overcoming any type of potential host rejection for these allogeneic therapies. And so timing, what are we saying for timing? I mean, what I can say is that without question, there's a lot of innovation going on in the space, right? There's a lot of time and effort by both CDMOs and also biotech and even academia in innovations in this space, working with different cell types, working with improved gene editing strategies. And there's also, I'm certain that we're going to see over the next few years improvements in that, in kind of the science, but also improvements in the manufacturing. I think we're going to be able to scale these up in bioreactors. We're going to be able to work with different cell types. And so I think what you're going to see is that we will start to see allogeneic pipeline products get into late stage trials within the next 5 years. I think we're very confident that we're going to be seeing that. And, and then what's going to happen is, it's the same type of thing we saw with autologous treatments. You're going to see more products advancing, some more successes in the clinic, which is going to spur more interest, more investment, more innovation. And I think it's going to be this cycle that's going to see the allogeneic area really grow. Great. And so what will that result in? Well, certainly that's going to result in these treatments being more broadly accessible by patients. They may become a preferred treatment option for patients. Be able to scale and look at indications that have larger patient populations. And, so then the other question kind of is, well, what impact is that going to have on cost? And I think if you look at this, certainly the upfront cost of having a manufacturing facility that can house these larger bioreactors, you're talking about an upfront cost. You're talking about an upfront investment in the facilities, in the equipment, in the staffing. But I think what you're going to see over the long term is that when you look across the full value chain of the cost of production, you're going to end up seeing a reduction in cost. And I think others have already referred to that. I believe that these allogeneic therapies will have a lower cost. And, with this lower cost in manufacturing, of course, will be ultimately a lower cost to the patients. And of course, when we're seeing these treatments that are successful in the clinic, we have manufacturing processes, it's going to become a treatment that's going to be more readily reimbursable. And of course, it's going to make it more accessible and more affordable to clients. So, we're still relatively early, in the process, but there are successes. There's a lot of work being done to improve and come at it, trying to scale up manufacturing, preserve these critical quality attributes. And I think these treatments are going to end up treating a broader array of patients and ultimately at a lower cost.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Very good input, benefits and a whole host of other challenges. I'd like to take this time to thank our panelists, Tom Page from Fujifilm, Rahul Singhvi, the CEO and co-founder of National Resilience, Rupert Pike from Thermo Fisher, and Tom Venkat from Catalent. Chris, I'd like to thank you as well, and also remind before the end of this session, please take a moment to submit your answers to the next 2 polling questions, which will appear on your screen now. Thank you very much, everyone.